Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish NFL show. It's the time for the Week 13 review, and in case you're wondering who I am, I'm going to be your host tonight. My name's Calla Ryan, and the lads have kindly asked me on board this good ship. I'm a long-time NFL fan from back in Miles Dungan Monday Night Highlights days. I then supported the Bills because the quarterback had an Irish name, Jim Kelly, and then I supported the Vikings because I'm half Swedish. That's why my name is Calla, and then dropped off, and then I'm back now to supporting the Panthers because my wife's from North Carolina. And then middle of the season, I kind of gave up on the Panthers because they've been doing so badly. But now that this is happening, I'm back. I'm not necessarily watching the Panthers, but I'm definitely watching the NFL. And tonight, we're going to talk about Week 13, lads. So maybe we'll just... I just want to also give a shout out to Cassidy Travel, sponsor of the Irish NFL show. Lots of packages. They're available for anyone who wants them. So look, let's start right away. The 9 p.m. slot was really where some of the big stuff happened. And maybe the first one that we want to talk about is the Bengals against the Chiefs. So I watched back the last show, and I think you put a curse on it, lads. The Chiefs did not win. So maybe tell me what you think about the game and where did it go wrong for the Chiefs? Where did it go right for the Bengals? Brian, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, you're right in what you're saying, Connor. The dreaded course, Colin always alludes to it on the show. When we all select the same team, it generally goes the other way. But in fairness with this game, this was I wouldn't say it was a hunch pick. We all selected the Chiefs based on the recent form. But this team, Bengals, have had their number. You know, we touched on it on the show on Thursday in the lead up to this game. They played each other twice late last year, week 17 in December, same stadium in Cincinnati. The Bengals came out on top in a very similar, very close game, and again in the playoffs in the championship game to beat them. So I don't think it's come as a surprise. The Bengals have been coming into a nice bit of form. And yesterday we saw what Joe Burrow was all about. He first pick in the draft a number of years ago. He's already been to a Super Bowl. Yesterday, he finds ways to win these big games. And yesterday, nothing fazed him. Chiefs were slow starting. Bengals got out early, 14-3. They I wouldn't say they left the Chiefs hanging around in a sense, but they were 3 for 7 in the red zone throughout the course of the game. The Bengals, the Chiefs were much more efficient when they got into the red zone play, which kept them in the game. Burrow, 25-31, 286 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the one thing for me in the game was, we've seen recently the Chiefs win some tough games and some close games, but in the fourth quarter of those games, the teams weren't able to put them away. They didn't score. Chargers a couple of weeks ago, 1 touchdown late on, and then they played the Titans in a close game in overtime in which the Titans didn't win. Yesterday, fourth quarter, when you really want your players to step up, 28 plays by the Bengals, 10 first downs, 10 points. The difference being other teams haven't been able to do that, and it's a really significant win. Bearing in mind what we spoke about, in particular the Buffalo Bills, who are now back on top of the AFC East, will obviously come to the game, which impacted that yesterday. But they're now the number 1 seed in terms of being in position to play the home games in the playoffs, and that's significant for the Chiefs. They'll be wondering what's going on because they just can't seem to. We had people social engaging us last week saying the Bengals just seem to have the Chiefs number, and right now they do. And would it come as a surprise if they play again in the playoffs come January? Probably not the way things are going.
Well, you never know. Mark, what about you? Anything to add to that? Any thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, Calla, it was a little bit more than they let them hang around. I mean, the Chiefs were winning this game going into the fourth quarter. I mean, they were up 24-17. And for once, the Bengals, who had the heartbreak, obviously, in the Super Bowl with the Rams coming back in the fourth quarter to overtake them, we commented live at the time going into the third quarter. This was the exact position they were in against the 49ers way back when, and it all slipped away from them. This time, they were the ones making the dramatic fourth quarter comeback. I will say, yes, Joe Burrow was exceptional, but you've got to remember it was more than just him. It always is. The defense, Jermaine Pratt, I did think at one point he might be the brother of Chris Pratt. Maybe not, maybe not. But Jermaine Pratt forced the fumble from Travis Kelce, which doesn't happen every so often. And bear in mind, 24-20, Burrow did the rest from there. He just was immaculate on that final drive. And that's what it takes, though. I mean, we say this, the Bengals have the Chiefs number, but you have to almost get, or they have to almost get to a level of immaculate performance, getting that early lead, then coming back, then getting the big play on defense, then Burrow playing lights out to close it down to beat the Chiefs. Both these teams will be there or thereabouts. I'm fascinated, Calais, about the end product of the AFC North now. Lamar Jackson hobbled yesterday. Don't worry, Colin, we'll get to that game. I know you're dying to talk about it. But they are stumbling again, the Ravens. And when it looked at the schedules, you kind of thought they're going to walk the rest of the division because the Bengals have a really tough road ahead. The Bengals are toughing it out in some big games. So the battle for the AFC North and even winning that division is definitely not over. And that's fascinating. And again, fair play to the Bengals. Many, many Bengals fans can rub it quite directly in our faces, and they should. We should not have doubted them continuing. Whatever about the Irish NFL show curse, the Burrow curse over Mahomes was more effective.
And Pratt may have fumbled, but Chris Pratt would never fumble anything. He'd take care of business and save the day, of course, right? Let's be clear on that. All right. Well, Colin, over to you finally then. Maybe give us your thoughts on the game as well.
Yeah, I got the result of the game wrong, but the Bengals were my pick. Marcus talking about the division. The Bengals were my pick. I thought they made good decisions in the offseason and in terms of the free agency acquisitions. And just like last season, they're finding form at the right time. I mean, this is when you want to come good. We've seen teams in the past start the season hot and then trail off. The Bengals do it the right way. They find form right towards the end of the season. I think given, and Mark alluded to it correctly, they do have a very tough run-in. But given the way the Ravens are playing, they will certainly say that they're in with a shout. And if they were to go on to win it and to win out, given the schedule that they have, maybe Joe Burrow might make a late season kind of push for that MVP race. Certainly Jamar Chase feels he should be in there. And I think the other thing that stood out to me yesterday, there was an awful lot of chirping from these players against each other on social media during the week. And it was the Bengals who seemed to enjoy that the most. Chase got flagged early on a touchdown pass, but it seemed to get into the Chiefs' heads. The not so with these Bengals.
Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of chirping and tweeting, please do drop your comments in there live for us. We can take on some of those questions if you have them, or comments, or say who's the bald guy who just joined. If you missed the beginning, I can tell you that again. Look, let's move on. Stay in the 9 p.m. window, but so the Niners took down the Dolphins, 33-17, a couple of late scores there. Sorry. But an interesting one, really, and especially for someone who hasn't watched the NFL for a while. It was an interesting matchup. I'm a fan of the 49ers, I have to say. But this one was an interesting game. Maybe go back the other direction here, and Colin, maybe you give me your first take on this before we go to the other lads.
Yeah, this was another game that I think we all went Dolphins. We all got it absolutely wrong, though. For that opening 10-15 seconds or so, it looked amazing. That initial scripted play was absolutely incredible. But after that, it was, look, I'll let Brian or Mark talk a little bit about Jimmy G. I've made my feelings very clear that I think you win. With Jimmy G, you don't win because of Jimmy G, and this was, highlighted that. But to me, this was about the 49ers defense. Look, they went and they basically bullied the Dolphins. They, at every opportunity, they took their lunch money, and Tua was under duress all day long. I will say that there's some kind of good clips of Mike McDaniel, who kept his team's spirit up, own some of his mistakes with the team, and it will be interesting to see how the Dolphins bounce back from this. I think they will, but ultimately they ran into a defense that they haven't seen before, and I mean, as the game went on, the 49ers just became more and more dominant. And I do not, even without their QB, nobody is going to fancy facing these 49ers if, and this is the only issue with San Francisco, if they can remain fit. And let's see what they do at the QB position. But my goodness, the edge rushers, the linebackers, it all came together for them.
Nice one. And what was your hot take there? You win with Jimmy G. You don't win because of Jimmy G. Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Controversial. Although I'm a fan of hints. Yeah, Brian, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, see, Colum's had a long-standing love affair with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he makes his feelings very clear on this man. And a 49ers fan said to me today, Brock Purdy, who's heard of him, Mr. Irrelevant, he was the last pick in the 7th round of the most recent draft last April. Can we go to a Super Bowl with him? Well, I reminded him, and Colin maybe should be reminded this, we're 3 years removed from when the 49ers went to the Super Bowl and was predominantly based on their defense. In the divisional round, Garoppolo was 11 of 19 for 131 yards, and in the championship game, he was 6 for 8 for 77 yards, and obviously their run game took over the Packers. Yesterday, Brock Purdy was 25 of 37, 210 yards, so not too dissimilar numbers. Maybe he's the kind of guy that can just manage the ship, allow their defense to bring them to the promised land. He had 2 touchdowns also yesterday. My concern for the 49ers going forward is after a period of time, other teams will get tape on this guy and quickly be able to realise what he is and suss him out. I would say from a Dolphins perspective yesterday, they were missing 2 offensive tackles, which was very evident towards the middle part of the game because Tua was getting very, very little time. We are used to seeing Tua with a kind of an offensive style, get the ball out quickly, but it seemed to be yesterday they were all the players that were being called quick 2 yards of steps and then ball out because essentially they knew he was going to get demoralised by a very strong front 7 of the 49ers, which I suppose it came to pass throughout the course of the game. And again, to be honest, the score maybe is a little bit of a ill justice on Dolphins because there was a number of late scores, but it's a significant win for the 49ers, more so because they are missing their quarterback now and they need to rack up these wins because Seattle are only a game behind them within the division. And for the Dolphins, they were top of the division. They'll have to regroup. Big game again for them next weekend against the Chargers. But now they're no longer top of the division, but a very strong 49ers defense, which is scary when it gets going on its day.
Yeah. And before I go to you, Mark, I just wanted to say the 49ers, I have a bone to pick with them. They stole the best player from the Panthers in Christian McCaffrey. So I guess I'm kind of the Christian McCaffrey of this podcast, right? I don't know how many for draft round picks we're going to hand to other podcasts for me arriving here. Perhaps not many. Mark, let's hear from you. What's your take? Do you have any hot takes like Colm on this one or where are you thinking?
Well, not necessarily, Callie. I'm going to call out, actually, even before this game, there was a bit of extra spice by some of the comments from Jimmy G. He actually let loose in his press conference before this game that the Dolphins, among others, were one of the teams interested in signing him in the off-season, which, of course, Tua is having an amazing season, but goes to the heart again of maybe that Dolphins management before the season were not fully invested in him. And rather, inopportunely, he was making comments about playing on turf and that in England, everyone in the Premier League plays on grass and it's better for players. Of course, the injury he suffered and he's gone for the season now has nothing to do with that, completely being squished between 2 defenders. But a portend of doom in some respects in that regard. And look, the story is clearly Brock Purdy. Like, he's Mr. Irrelevant no more. I'm trying to remember the famous Brocks in my life. There's Brock Lesnar, WWE wrestler. Brock Osweiler, who I don't like to talk of because he beat the Patriots one time, and Colm doesn't like to talk of because it upsets his blood pressure too much, having seen him play quarterback in Denver. And then there's this. There's, Mr. Irrelevant, who now becomes extremely relevant because he is going to have to be the tiller trying to direct the 49ers. The lads have nailed it with the defense. Stat I've been calling out for a while. It was week 7. The Dolphins actually broke something. They scored a touchdown in the second half. That's the first points the 49ers conceded in the second half of the game since week 7. This defense has been more than lights out. It has been downright dirty and nasty. And in this amazing matchup between McDaniel and Shanahan, we were all going with the Dolphins thinking McDaniel knows that team, he knows the players, he knows Shanahan. Well, you got to remember, of course, it equally plays the other way. Shanahan knows McDaniel and what he's trying to do on the Dolphins side. It was a great game. Obviously, it didn't play as we expected with Garoppolo going off so early. There were some long-range touchdowns. Lots of great play by your friend, Run CMC, Calais. So you were delighted, I'm sure, to see him getting yards from scrimmage every which way but loose. And that is what that 49ers team continues to offer on the offensive side. If it's not C-Mac, it might be Ayuk. If it's not him, it might be Kittle. If it's not them, it could be Samuel. They can all run the ball. They can all definitely catch and run with the ball. And if you've got a quarterback who's just going to give them the ball at the right stage, this could be a first Tom Brady Super Bowl. This could be a Trent Dilfer type situation with the Ravens. This could be Brad Johnson with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You might just need the caretaker. And don't turn the ball over. Get the ball to your playmakers and let that defense do the rest. So 49ers fans might be feeling sad with Jimmy G's injury, but there is always hope. And, who knows? Would you another Super Bowl rematch of this nature might be interesting. Dan Marino, John Montana, take two, just with Tua and Brock Purdy. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's see how it shakes out. Okay. Well, listen, we have another game at the 9 o'clock slot that we're going to talk about now, and that was the Raiders getting their revenge for week 1, beating the Chargers 27-20. So the Raiders are in a little bit of a run here. Maybe, Brian, do you want to kick us off on this one? I see you're good on the stats as well. Give me some good stats on this one as well, if you can.
Oh, well, I don't have too many stats on this game, but
shit! Sorry.
I do. I'll tell you where the game turned. 3 plays in the third quarter, 14 points for the Raiders, essentially changing the game dramatically. Look, I make my.
That's a stat. Good man.
There's a stat. I'll always give you a good stat. Look, 3 weeks ago, Josh McDaniels, the Raiders head coach, was being talked about as the next head coach before. They just lost to the Colts, Jeff Saturday, and his opportunity to be a head coach of the Colts. They lost that game and everybody thought the world had collapsed. And since then, they've now won 3 games in a row, 2 overtime, and a significant game in the division. I make my feelings very clear on this Chargers team and the Chargers head coach week in, week out. As Dunphy would say, they're a share of spoofers. And they really are, because yesterday again was an opportunity in a big game to put themselves in a position. Bearing in mind they would have been aware of the Jets results, which would have impacted on them being back in the playoff positions. They go and lose a game against a big rival. And one thing I'd say about this Raiders team, we said it last week, they are playing for this head coach right now. And Josh Jacobs, who's their running back and arguably is probably going to be one of the number 1 targets for most teams come free agency in March, because it doesn't look like, as well as he's playing, he had 303 yards last week. He didn't have similar numbers this week, but he got the touchdowns. As well as he's playing, it doesn't look like they're going to honour him with a new contract. And he put the game away. There was a big, long, strong drive at the end to put the game away. And these are the type of games in the past the Raiders in particular would find ways to lose. But right now, Devontae Adams is playing. We're starting to see Devontae Adams and carry that relationship. They had a flea flicker touchdown last week in Seattle, and they did it again this week, this time from Mac Hollins to Devontae Adams. It's a significant win for the Raiders. They're playing the Rams on Thursday with an opportunity to win 4 games in a row, and maybe they aren't there with this wildcard race. Maybe there's another story to be told. From a Chargers perspective, it's 0-0 early in the game. They're on a 4th and 2, and again, this head coach continuously decides to go for everything on 4th down instead of taking 3 points when offer. Maybe it would have came down to a little bit of a different strategy towards the end of the game. They may not have been down by 7. They could have been down by 3 or 4. It could have been very different. I just don't see, bearing in mind the closeness of every game in divisions in particular, where you're giving away opportunity not to take points. But this head coach was brought in to fix the defense in particular, and we saw again on the last drive, they can't stop the run. They allowed Jacobs to go up and down the field on him for large parts of the game, and when they really needed to stop, they couldn't do it. And that sums up this Chargers team. We just don't know from one week to the next what we're going to see from them.
Yeah, defense probably not fixed then is probably the takeaway there. All right, Mark, how about you? Any other insights on that one yourself?
Yeah, you want a couple of stats, Calais, so I'm going to say...
Yes, I do. I want stats.
Well, I mean, okay. Does it feel like there have been more comebacks this year? Does it feel like there have been more fourth quarter comebacks or big point differential triggers? Well, the reality is it does, because there has been. So at the weekend, the Packers and the Raiders contributed to the number of teams who have 10 plus point comebacks during the game. Also, the Giants, Brian, we'll get to them, did come back from 10 points down, albeit only to tie. There have been 39 games of that nature this season. That's the most in the NFL all time through 13 weeks. Equally, there have been 62 games in which a team has come back in the fourth quarter to win or tie, which again is the most ever in the NFL through 13 weeks of games. So there you go. That's my interesting stat for the night. I'm done. No more stats.
Winner.
I'm good.
You're the winner on the stats there.
I like that. But look, this Raiders team, and Brian's kind of, publicly hung the Chargers there, so I'll leave them alone for a minute. I'm going to give a bit of praise to this Raiders team. I mean, they are responsible for several of those comebacks, having thrown away leads miserably a few times at the start of the season, including a couple of 17-plus point leads. And when they lost to the Colts, Derek Carr gave a very emotional news conference, called out some teammates, got very teary on the news, on the press box. Since then, they're 3-0. Since then, they've almost cut it back down to basics. They are leaning on Josh Jacobs. They are leaning on Devontae Adams. Yet again, an amazing performance, 8 receptions, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. And it's almost like they've just simplified everything down. They're not even trying to find Hollins. They're not trying to find Waller. They're not trying to find anyone else. It's hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs, throw the ball to Devontae Adams, don't do anything stupid, and they're getting wins out of it. Maybe it's a little bit too late for the playoffs. Maybe at the end of the day, that Colts loss will be the difference between them making it or not making it. But they are certainly turning this around step by step and showing some life in the season that was heading strongly in the wrong direction. And yet again, the only thing I'll say about the Chargers, this was a huge opportunity. The Patriots are falling off with their strength of schedule. There's definite opportunity for a playoff space there, for a wild card space. They're not going to obviously catch up with the Chiefs, and they should be winning this game. They should be winning a lot more of these types of games, and those opportunities allow them to pass. Obviously, we recanted beforehand the history of this. The last time they played the end of last season, of course, with the Chargers failing at the end, the Raiders getting the walk-off field goal in interesting circumstances where a tie would have suited both parties, to say the least, and not making the playoffs. And too many times with the talent they are, they're just throwing away the opportunities. So, sorry, Chargers fans. There's the boot going in as well. I know.
You send your comments. Let Mark know what you think of that. All right, Colin. I'm not requiring stats, but if you have some, obviously, I'd love them. But otherwise, I just wanted to hear your take on it. I think we have a fairly clear picture, but any other thoughts?
To me, I suppose, and Brian has kind of talked a little bit around it already, but after that loss to the Colts, they went out and they got Jerry Tillery, former Charger, former first-round pick, who the Chargers declined the fifth-round option, and then he was released, and the Raiders picked him up, and that seems to have really kind of shored up their D-line and has allowed kind of Chandler Jones to break through. And they suddenly last year they were all about the pass rush. They were all about making opposing QBs uncomfortable, and that is what they are doing again. And much like as a Manchester United fan, I remember Ryan Giggs would have these incredible years every time there was a contract up for grabs, and we are seeing the same with Josh Jacobs. He's going to get paid. He has over 100 yards rushing in each of the last 3. For this was one. Did we all go Raiders in this one? I think this was one where we beat the curse. The Chargers were one of the preseason favorites, but I am not a big fan of any of their wide receivers. I am a big fan of Justin Herbert. But I am definitely coming around to Brian's viewpoint on the head coach. I think he maybe a bit like Vic Fangio and others can be a very good defensive coordinator, but the head coaching gig, it might be just too big. And I think if the Chargers don't get things figured out very, very soon, we could see certainly a change of head coach and potentially even a change in their front office as well.
Yeah, interesting times. Okay, well, let's move on to the a few of the 6 p.m. games. So, Colm, I know you were actually at the Minnesota Vikings game over Thanksgiving there, and I was curious. It was a close game then. I guess we had another one, close one there last night. They fended off the Jets there for a late rally, and they won it 27-22. Maybe you could to give us your take on it there, and what you made of the game, and why you think it played out the way it did.
Yeah, this Vikings team certainly come with a lot of skepticism from a lot of people because they tend to adjust. So last year they did the same. They played the opposition. But last year they inevitably found ways to lose games. This year they find ways to win games. So their last 4 games, Calla, they've actually played the top 4 defenses in terms of DVOA. And they have come out with a 3-1 record, which is seriously impressive given what they faced. And despite some of the questions around Kirk Cousins that continue to be there, Kirk has been getting it done. In Justin Jefferson, they have a ridiculously talented wide receiver, and their defense turned up when they needed them to yesterday. For the Jets, I think Mike White did okay. There's always this, when Mike White comes in, he starts off with a bang, and there is all sorts of kind of giddiness around him. But I didn't think he regressed a little bit yesterday, but I still think he was probably more impressive than anything that we've seen from the number 2 overall pick last year, Zach Wilson. So for my money, I think they will probably continue to play him. And I think they will just chalk this down to a difficult road game against a tough Vikings team. And for the Vikings, look, they're going to be kings in the North this year. There is, I think, little doubt about that. And the question will be, can the feel-good factor that Kevin O'Connell has instigated in that locker room, how far will that be able to carry them in the playoffs?
Interesting. They will be kings of the North. So their watch has not ended for all you Game of Thrones fans out there. Mark, any additional takes on that one? I think Colm's made his position clear, but what about you?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised when Colm was bringing up, Mike White and the Big Bang. I wondered, was he going to talk about the scientific theory or the famous sitcom, The Big Bang Theory? Or in fact, knowing Colm, it might well have been the South Korean boy band, The Big Bang, was where he was actually going to. But Mike White, I actually have to say, I think is a vast improvement on Zach Wilson, and the team is rallying around him. They all wore T-shirts with his face on in the build-up to the game. They are believing in Mike White, and certainly when it looked like they were going to launch one of those famous comebacks, I was just giving you the stats on the last game. They were down 17 points in the first half. They were down 12 points in the fourth quarter, and White gutted out a run effectively, and you could see almost the passion, the teamwork, the camaraderie oozing between those Jets. Like Colm said, their comeback fell short. The Vikings made just enough plays to escape with the victory, to escape in another one-score game, which we've obviously had a number of this season as well across the board. And the Vikings somehow are finding a way to fight through it. But I actually thought for the Jets fans that have suffered so long, I remember we did the draft show on Virgin Media a couple of years ago, and I described them as the William Shakespeare of the NFL, because Shakespeare only wrote histories, tragedies, and comedies, and the Jets' best days are in the history, and everything else since has been a tragedy or a comedy. The reality is this is the first time, maybe the Rex Ryan years, I grant you, in the early noughties, you could, or early tens, if you like, you could include, but this is the first time in a long time they've had a lot of hope. That's still an absolutely awesome defense. Mike White's given them a spark, and Robert Saleh is one of the best coaches in the NFL, full stop. So nice. Hope springs, but those Vikings, Yeah, we'll still see. Still see.
All right. Brian, what's your take on that? We got a little bit of back and forth on it.
They got to lose the t-shirts. I mean, what's the t-shirts all about? He's not a rookie coming into the league. I mean, it's cringe TV. You know, they're so wanting to reward the guy for having been there for so long and not having had his opportunity, that they're bringing out these t-shirts and everybody's talking so great about him after games.
It's for merch sales, surely. That's what they're doing for.
Look, they must trust him because they allowed him yesterday. They called 57 passing plays yesterday. He had 2 interceptions. They've got a really strong running game there, and he kind of got away from that fairly early. You're asking for stats, and I'll give you a couple there. 3 for 16,
yes.
3 for 16 on third downs, Mike White. 1 for 6 in the red zone, Mike White. You know, this Jets defense, which we were lauding on Thursday's show as one of the best in the league, and when they got back into the game at a critical point, they with 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, they allowed the Vikings, so hadn't moved the ball for by and large 12 minutes in an NFL game, which is quite a lot of time, bearing in mind some of the drives you could have. They allowed them to go 7 for 75 yards, 5 first downs. The only 5 first downs which they had in the second half were all in one drive, and they allowed a touchdown, which essentially gave the game away. And I'm not going to buy into the Mike White stuff just yet. Yeah, it's good for them because they've had such a difficult season with the previous quarterback, but the game was there to be won yesterday, and I thought some of the play calling by the head coach and the reliance on him to be the one winning the game for them was a bit unfair. And just to reflect on what the guys are saying about this Vikings team, and Colin rightly called out the amount of times last year in which they lost games they should have won. And I was looking through the list today of the games in which they have won at home with all these, you know, quite close games. And I looked at genuinely every team that's played there has probably walked away saying, how have we not won that game? The Jets yesterday will feel like they should have won it, bearing in mind the circumstances, how the game played out. The Lions should have beaten, they lost by 4 points. The Cardinals lost by 5 points. They had the game to win. The Bears came back and lost by 6 points. And last week, Mark's Patriots, and the game which Colin was at, they lost by a touchdown. And every single one of those teams will have walked away from that game going, how did we not beat that Vikings team? But they are where they are. They're the second seed in the NFC, and they're winning the close games. I would put a lot of it down to great head coaching. Earlier on in the season, we were talking about who's going to be the coach of the year, and obviously the Giants and Brian Dable was in the running, Mike Vrabel from the Titans. But how can you fault Kevin O'Connell? They're up there. They're only one game outside of the fourth seed in the NFC. Another great win for the Vikings, who play the Lions this week in another difficult game. And every week the bookmaker doesn't fancy them. Well, I think the Lions are actually favourites to beat the Vikings this weekend, despite the records. So that's an unusual one as well. Great win for the Vikings. For the Jets, the Mike White era is off to a patchy start, I would say.
Oh, did you have a counterpoint there, Mark?
Yeah, well, yeah, Cal, I thought at first Brian, you know, breaking down the Vikings wins was going a bit Dennis Allen almost, like they are who we thought they were. Thought he was building up to a good old rant there, but I can't hear the blasphemy against the Jets defense. I mean, Brian's right. The Vikings did drive for a touchdown, and then what did the Jets defense do? They tightened up. They gave the offense the ball back twice, forcing 2 3-and-outs. So they gave the offense enough opportunities to win the game. Of course, it wasn't enough, but that defense is amazing. Like, come on, give them their credit.
It was a significant time in the fourth quarter, Mark. All the momentum. I know they gave them the opportunity.
The fourth quarter is always significant, though. Let's be clear.
Yeah. All quarters.
The second one helps as well.
All quarters are significant, yeah. All right, well, and also there's other Mike Whites. Mike White, who wrote The White Lotus and School of Rock, he's excellent too, although maybe this isn't the forum to talk about that, but recommendations if anyone's interested. All right, cool. Now, Brian, did you want to put up some comments here maybe? You said there was a couple coming in, and I'm fresh to this, so let me know how we want to do it.
Yeah, no, I'll just blast a few up on the screen and we can all maybe
do it, yeah.
On this one. So Baker Mayfield was released by the Panthers today. Any team that picks him up on the waiver wire will have a cost of 1.3 million. 1.3 million for the rest of the season. And this relates back to the 49ers because of the situation with Jimmy G gone for the season. Will they consider bringing Baker Mayfield in? Their next quarterback up, should Brock Purdy get injured, is Josh Johnson, who played for the Jets last year. So maybe it wouldn't be a bad insurance.
They might as well take him. They took everyone else who was any good at the Panthers, so that's fine with me.
Colin Baker Mayfield?
Just Josh Johnson. I think this is team number 14, and this is, I believe, is his fourth stint. I believe the Wikipedia page was updated last night to reflect that. I think it's the most stints at any team in terms of it may have been that somebody came back for a one-day contract, but certainly in terms of playing. For Baker, I mean, this is quite phenomenal. We are not that far removed from when he had a decent year and the Browns went to the playoffs. So it's clearly things have gone very, very wrong for him. And I mean, I suppose the only I don't know. I wonder would Kyle Shanahan want to upset what they have got going on there, but if they were to pick him up, it would be interesting to see what Kyle could potentially do. Kyle might be the only head coach who could do something with Baker Mayfield. But yeah, the Browns have a long litany of number one overall QB picks who have been enormously disappointing.
Oh, that's so diplomatic of you. They've been crap. Column is what you mean.
Yes.
Mark, did you have anything you want to throw in there?
Calais, I'm not loving the idea of the 49ers relying upon Josh Johnson in any capacity. As Colin said, I mean, he's the Vinny Testaverde of this generation, except with far less production and far less arm talent than Vinny Testaverde.
And a less cool name. Testaverde is probably one of the greatest names.
Although Josh Johnson's kind of got a bit of alliteration going on, I think that can work.
Okay, fair enough.
If you can pick up Baker Mayfield and doesn't count low against the salary cap as a backup to Purdy, I mean, Jesus, how have the mighty fallen? Number one pick being backup to Mr. Irrelevant would be something else. But who else do they take? You mean, they need some veteran backup. I wouldn't be comfortable in relying on Johnson. So the 49ers probably make some adjustment this week. I don't know if Baker's the answer. I'd rather, look, we got Mike White now playing for the Jets. I'd rather they took Jack White from the White Stripes. That'd probably be better.
Yes. It'd be more rocking anyway, that's for sure. I think I see you itching, Colin. What do you want to say there?
Just on the Mr. Irrelevant piece, because it's a talking point all the time. The Broncos took Mr. Irrelevant a few years ago, Chad Kelly, who was a nephew of the famous Jim Kelly, who caused you...
My original interest in NFL. Wow.
Indeed. And Chad Kelly became most famous for getting drunk at Von Miller's Halloween party.
I'd say there was loads of people who did that.
Stumbling out the door, finding his way into somebody's house. They came out to find him on the couch and attacked him with a Roomba. So that was the end of Chad Kelly's NFL career, where he was chased down the street with a Roomba.
A Roomba, like the vacuum cleaner robot thing?
Yeah, the person picked it up. It was the closest thing to hand and proceeded to beat him over the head until he ran out the door.
That's beyond humiliating. All right. Mark, Brian, did you have anything you want to throw in there to the Roomba discussion or irrelevance or all of the above?
A lot of engagement over the fact that Mark was talking about Brocks earlier on, this Brock and that Brock, and maybe it's you put in the Brock you put in the coddle. Is that what you call it? But Brock, don't forget Brock Landers, Mark.
That was the one I thought of.
Yeah, Brock Wright is actually playing in the NFL. He had a touchdown yesterday against the Jaguars. You forgot that one, Mark.
I did forget that one. Thank you, Stephen.
Maybe he was in your fantasy team. A couple of comments around the 49ers, obviously their defense, which kind of refers to what we said. Keith's a big Dolphins fan, and he's discussing about not many quarterbacks have had successful days this season against that defense. And this is an interesting one because bearing in mind that the Chargers traded for Khalil Mack last offseason. They're saying he's a busted flush. I think it's a bit early to be saying that, despite the frailties of this Chargers defense. But that's it. There's quite a few other comments. We'll try to get some more.
Great. Well, keep them coming. Yeah, keep them coming. We'll go on to the next game, lads, if that's okay. Let's talk about the Eagles game. I mean, they made light work of the Titans this week. I mean, who is going to stop this Eagles team? Like, I haven't watched much NFL, but I know the Eagles are doing well. So maybe, Brian, do you want to kick us off on this one? Is anyone going to stop the Eagles? What do you think?
God, yeah, I'm speechless with this team. Calla, this wouldn't be one of the teams in which I have much brotherly love for, as they say. Philadelphia.
See what you did there.
As a Giants fan, no, I wouldn't be very keen. But look, I was very hesitant on this team going into the season. Even early on in the season, I wasn't selecting them, and the lads thought I was doing it to be deceivious and because of my hatred for the team. But no, you got to give it to this team. I thought this Titans team were built to slow them down. But what I would say about this Titans team is the way in which they win games, they tend to lead and put teams away. When they go behind by more than a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, they find it very difficult to catch up. They're just not built in that way. They've got a great coach. So when they find themselves down by 2 touchdowns against a team as explosive as the Eagles, it's going to be very difficult to come back. And a few things I really picked up on yesterday. Jalen Hurts, who's been such a run-heavy quarterback this season in terms of the playbook, he only ran the ball 5 times yesterday. And even Sanders, their more efficient running back, didn't have the greatest of games. It was quiet, but ultimately it came down to Jalen Hurts again, surprising me with how good he is with his arm. 29 for 39, 380 yards, 3 touchdowns. I said on the show AJ Brown would go off in this game because he was traded last April from the Titans when he was looking for a contract. They offered him $16 million. He wanted 22. The Eagles were happy to pay it and sacrifice their first round pick. He had 8 receptions for 119 yards, 2 touchdowns. They went to town on this team, and one player that has been injured and not playing, their defensive tackle, their first round pick, Jordan Davis, came back yesterday, and immediately you could see the upside in terms of how efficient they are in stopping the run, going against the Titans, who have arguably one of the best running backs in the league, and Derrick Henry. Great for the Eagles to see him back at such a significant time this season. They really put down a marker yesterday. Like, we all knew they were in all likelihood to be number 1 seed, but when you're beating a team so convincingly as a team that will be in the playoffs, albeit in the AFC, it's a huge result for them. And you look at the games in which they're coming up, I don't think anybody's going to beat them in terms of stopping them being the number 1 seed. And right now with the 49ers situation, I'm looking at the NFC and I'm wondering who will beat them, because they've already played the Vikings. And I know playoffs are very different to the regular season. They put a marker down on them in week 2. Maybe it'll be the Cowboys. They're having a great season. They had a really strong performance last night. We'll come to that. Maybe they are the team ultimately that will be the team that can knock them off. But right now, I don't see any team, unfortunately, stopping them.
So your answer is a grudging. Maybe there's nobody can beat them. Maybe they will make it there all the way. Okay.
Well, Colin picked them to be in the Super Bowl. So Colin been smiling like a Cheshire cat for weeks on end, and he is again. But
go on then, Colin. Elaborate on that Cheshire cat smile. Tell us why you're beaming.
Because if you go back 2 years, there was an awful lot of doubts from the 2 gentlemen below me about Jalen Hurts and his ability to play quarterback in this league. And I get a whole host of things wrong, but I was the conductor of the Jalen Hurts hype train. So it is wonderful to see it pay off. And Howie Roseman has done a fantastic job in terms of putting that roster together. Yeah, AJ Brown certainly enjoyed his afternoon, and Brian rightly calls out getting Jordan Davis back is, enormous, both literally and figuratively. He is a 320-pound man who runs a 40-second dash in 4.5 seconds. For the Titans, Mike Vrabel is a heck of a coach, but ultimately this is a team that was built on their ability to bully teams in the trenches on both the O-line and the D-line, and injuries have taken their toll this year, and they are not able to do that in the same way. Teams have therefore been able to scheme and come up with ways to limit Derrick Henry's effectiveness. It will be interesting to see how the Titans look to respond to that, and what they can do to see out the rest of the season. I think they're very fortunate that they're in a division that's going to be very kind to them. So I think they will probably make the playoffs, certainly. So I think for them, the rest of the season is trying to right the ship on both of the lines and get back to where they once were.
Right. So we have a grudging respect for them. We have a beaming Cheshire cat. Mark, what's yours? Are you smiling? Are you sad? Is anyone going to beat these Eagles? What's your thought?
I feel the need to point out on behalf of all Washington Commanders fans that they have beaten the Eagles this year. And they are very good in that 11-1 record. But at the same token, they've been the class team in the NFL, obviously, especially in the NFC. And let's face it, that NFC East is not made up of chumps this season. So they've got some tough divisional games ahead still, but they have played everyone on the, they played the Vikings, they gave them a thump, and they played the Cowboys. It's not a fake record. It's not a question like with the Vikings. Yes, they're 10-2, but look at their point differential. Look at the games that have mattered, and they've been the two big ones they've lost. So it's a very real scenario. And I am on the Jalen Hurts apology train. Absolutely. When we've got more than enough recordings of me questioning Jalen Hurts' ability to play quarterback in the NFL. I never doubted his ability to play running back, but I doubted his ability to play quarterback. And he's definitely been one of the most dynamic running quarterbacks. I mean, from the city that originally gave us Randall Cunningham, that was the prototype in this regard. He has performed that dual role extremely well. Only a few weeks ago when they ran for 363 yards and Hurts kept waiting for a lot of it. But then it's great to see him with this side of of his play as well. That's what really keeps defenses off balance. I think back to Colin Kaepernick and those great playoff games for the 49ers against the Packers. And one time he beats them with his legs, the next time he just beats them with his arm. It's like, you're going to stop me doing this? Then I'm going to beat you the other way. This game was all about A.J. Brown. Sorry, the revenge klaxon was flaring, and he was more than determined to take out his revenge and wreak his vengeance on the Titans that in his mind abandoned him by trading him to the Eagles. But why is he complaining? He's on an 11-1 team which throws the ball around and gives him multiple opportunities, as opposed to being the only deep threat in a offense that wants to run the ball even more frequently. I also want to give a shout out to the Eagles defense. There have been games where they have been sublime this season. They haven't been as consistent as the offense, but yesterday, 0 points for the Titans in the second half. We're calling out the 49ers, so let's call out the Eagles for doing that. Locking down any NFL offense in that way is special when you're limiting Derrick Henry to 30 yards on 11 carries. Limiting Ryan Tannehill to 141 yards, not as impressive, but sacking him 6 times and keeping him on the back foot is pretty impressive. They've got it all. I called it out last week. The 4 times they've been 10-1 before, they have advanced to the championship game. 47, they won the NFL, lost the Super Bowl in 80 and 2004, and won it, obviously, a couple of years ago. The only 3 times they've been 11-1 were, again, back in 47, 80, and 2004. So you might say it's destined to be, and in some ways inevitable, but let's see.
A date with destiny. And as far as the Jalen train goes, where there's the hype train and the apology train, I think I'm probably still at the platform wondering which train I should be catching at this point, Okay, we'll move on. So here's a rare one, and I'm probably going to need one of you to explain, but there was a draw or a tie, as they say. A 2020 game was between the Giants and the Commanders, isn't that right? So how does a tie work? Because I thought there was overtimes and all of that. Forgive me, I'm sure there's a very educated football audience out there, but I sort of was baffled by it. I didn't realize how you make a tie. Does anyone jump in on that?
So Callie, it's actually really simple. If teams are tied after 4 quarters, it goes now to only a 10-minute overtime period. And if those 2 teams are so pathetic that they cannot put a further score on the board during those 10 minutes, then in that scenario, they draw it a tie, and they, kind of add a 1 at the end of their record as a sign of shame. We've already had one tie.
I think there's a jab in there. Is there, Mark? Brian,
there might be something directed towards the Giants, but Brian's going to break down how they came back from 10 points down, had the Commanders by the throat, and then somehow let it all slip away.
Calla, I'd just like to remind Mark, there was a team which made the playoffs a couple of years ago because they had a tie on their results, and it got them into the playoffs. And right now, that result is benefiting the Giants now to be in the playoff mix. It's funny, you're saying you don't know what the rules are. One of the Washington players didn't know what the rule was either, because
great, I'm in good company then.
At the end of the game, when Graham Gano, the Giants kicker, had an opportunity to win the game with a 58-yard field goal, he wasn't making anything close to that in the warm-up because of the wind in that particular stage. He was only hitting 53 to that end of the field. The Washington player says to him, "Sure, what happens now?" And Graham Gano said, "We go home." But Mark refers to the Giants being down 10 points. They were down 10 points very early, and it looked like it was one of those games again that was going to get away from them, and they rallied and came back. And it is very much a feeling today for Giants fans, a one that they let slip. They were 20-13 up for large parts of the fourth quarter, and it took a 90-yard drive with 2 minutes to go from the Commanders to get the game into overtime, in which there was a fourth down play, which was a miraculous play again by their quarterback Heineke, who seems to be a slippery little slow because he fumbled the ball 3 times yesterday and the Giants only recovered one of them. There was missed opportunities for interceptions. In overtime itself, they only had 1 first down. The Giants completely shut them down for large parts of the game, with the exception of that last-minute drive, which was quite frustrating. And then, as I said, the Giants had an opportunity to win the game in the end. Yeah, it's a bit weird to see it tied. There isn't many of them. We have had one earlier in the season between the Colts and the Texans in week 1. I did text the guys last night and say, I have no feelings whatsoever after that game. And Mark said, it's like kissing your sister. To which I replied saying, I don't have a sister, so where do I go from here? And that's how it pretty much feels. It's one that slipped away. Excuse me, but maybe in the longevity of an NFL season, come week 18 when the playoff spots are being filled,
it might be crucial.
It could be crucial.
You never know.
Please, God.
It might mean nothing as well,
Yeah.
but they might make a wild card spot. Don't worry. You never know. Colin, what about you? What's your take on this drawn game here?
Well, Mr. O'Leary was complaining earlier about some of the penalties that the Giants had, particularly a taunting penalty. But what Mr. O'Leary failed to point out was that the owner, who pushed for taunting to be a much more serious offence, for referees to enforce it. And even last year, when many fans, many analysts, many players complained about the new taunting rules, wanted a change at the owners' meeting in the spring, the man who had put the rule together and pushed for it stood up again and said, no, this is what we want. We want to continue this. We want to see it continue to be enforced. And that man is the man who owns the New York Football Giants. So, reaping and sowing, if you are familiar with that meme from social media, that's where we are at. I think both of these teams, the kind of ding-dong nature of it convinced the league to flex it into the Sunday night fixture in just a few weeks. I think both of these teams are probably, you would look at it and say, neither of them are probably complete rosters, but both of them have really good head coaches, and they're both, I think, playing for their respective head coaches, be that Brian Daboll, who has just taken over at the Giants, or Ron Rivera. And it will be interesting to see the next time these teams meet, if we see Chase Young back on a football field. The Washington Commanders have been taking, I think is correct, a kind of a cautious approach with him. They want to ensure he's right, because they want him around for long term of his career. But it sounds like he is very, very close, and they just weren't going to play him yesterday because of the turf.
Very good. Well, listen, we're going to go into, as I understand, you have your little quickfire segment, so we're going to go quickfire now. I know there's a bit of rules we probably need on taunting here as well, so we'll have to write those for next week. But let's just go through the other ones. Mark, I'll go to you first, just with the Cowboys and the Colts. Just tell me your quick thoughts on that.
Kelly, surprisingly, if you look at the final score, this was actually a very competitive game through 3 quarters. The Colts were only 2 points behind. They were pushing the Cowboys close. And then all of a sudden, I think the expression "open the floodgates" comes from about the 15th century. If we want a more recent pop culture reference, Maximus Decimus Meridius, at my signal, unleash hell. And the Cowboys unload for 5 touchdowns in a 33-point fourth quarter. There are NBA teams who would be happy with a 33-point quarter, let's be clear. And, ends up being an absolute trouncing, 54 points. It does remind me, with you being on the show, Callie, like the Denver Broncos discussion has at least reduced 50%, which is a bit like their offensive output as well.
Oh,
Denver's scored 45 points since Halloween. Dallas managed it 54 in a night. So
that's a sick burn right there.
That, and not because Colin's going to shoot me, but I'm exiting stage left for the rest of the show, and I will leave you gents to it. But I'm glad to support Fred and the Cowboys teams to get that in, and just a few parting shots before I love you and leave you tonight, gents.
Nice one, Mark. Thanks for that, and enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, we will keep rapid firing in your absence. So I'm going to go to Colin for this one. The Seahawks winning late against the Rams, 27-23. What's your take on that?
Yeah, this was a kind of an interesting game because the Rams are so depleted. I mean, without Stafford, without Aaron Donald, without Cooper Kupp, kind of three of their major players. And the Seahawks have been pretty impressive this year, but had been on a bit of a slide. These are two teams who don't like each other, maybe at the best of times, but with Bobby Wagner having left Seattle, he was very fired up. Jalen Ramsey was very fired up. But we saw Pete Carroll, who I have had interesting thoughts on, but put my hand up already this year and apologize. And in fairness to Pete, he got the team together because he saw that the Rams were looking to get fired up on their sideline, and he got the team together and kind of got them going as well. And ultimately, the Seahawks find a way to win. For the Rams, the end of the season can't come soon enough. With them falling to 3-9, it is the worst record of any defending Super Bowl champion in the Super Bowl era. So, they just cannot wait to get this one over and done with. And what will be interesting, though, is while they can't wait to get it over and done, will we see Sean McVay back next year? Will we see Aaron Donald back next year? Those will be the big questions for the off season.
Yeah, big questions indeed. Okay, Brian, what about the Lions and their game again at home this past weekend, 40-14?
Yeah, very impressive. I mean, the one thing we've spoke about even on our show today is how efficient this offense has been this year. They've been a really bright spot, and they've lost some difficult games because of how poor their defense has been. They've had so many high-scoring games. But we saw a real dominant performance from the defense yesterday, and Trevor Lawrence was put out a game which looked like a potentially game-ending injury, potentially a season-ending injury, only to come back in the third quarter. But like you look at the stats from this game, 9 possessions in total for the Lions. They scored on 8 possessions in a row, and the 9th possession was them essentially taking a knee to close out the game. It's only the second time it's been done in NFL history. It's only the second time it's been done in 4 years. Apologies. So the numbers are off the charts. Goff, the quarterback, who's had a lot of criticism, even on this show, people have a mixed opinion on him. He did take the Rams to the Super Bowl, 31-42, 342 yards yesterday, 3 touchdowns. We were speaking the other day on the show around where the Lions sit in terms of draft picks next year. They do have a pick in the top 10 because they have another team's pick. So essentially, they will be in a position to take a quarterback. But right now, you'd wonder if unless there's someone that they really, really love, should they be looking at a quarterback? Because the numbers in which they put up this season are off the charts. And a game in which we felt we did say it'd be a high-scoring game. We felt it'd be quite close. Bearing in mind how well the Jags played last week and beating the Ravens, they blew them they blew them out of the water. The game was over by half-time, and they have a really good game this weekend against the Vikings. And for the Jags, it kind of sums up the season. You have a number of bright spots. The inconsistency is there. We've seen Trevor Lawrence's development throughout the course of the season in terms of his improvement. But they just can't seem to put a consistent run together. And I picked the Lions, the guys picked the Jags, but I can understand why they did, because it was one of those games you thought the Jags were turning a corner, and again they're back to square one. Very impressive offensive performance and defensive performance. It's Dan Campbell, the head coach's best defensive display from his team since he went in there in his second year as head coach.
Wow. Yeah. Let's go quickly over then, Colm, to you. Let's talk about the Packers taking on the Bears, 28-19. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, death, taxes, and Aaron Rodgers beating the Bears. Some things are just predestined, and that's how it happens. I didn't think we would see Justin Fields play. We did, and my goodness, he had a couple of moments. We talked probably a month, certain maybe 6 weeks ago, about the best case scenario I felt for the Bears for the rest of the season was Justin Fields showed he was the guy, the franchise guy, but that the Bears essentially lost high-scoring games. And that is what has kind of happened. They know he is the guy, but they need to put talent around him. They have to find guys on both sides of the ball. But they look to have, a proper head coach in place. It'll be up to the GM to show in the offseason that he can build a roster. But there is an awful lot to be excited about. And as for the Packers, they get their customary win. The biggest thing for them is that they are now the winningest franchise in NFL history. They have the most wins of any franchise in the league, and that is a record they took from the Bears, a divisional rival. So and Aaron Rodgers also yesterday became the Packers QB with the most wins against the Bears. So he continues to accumulate numerous stats, and maybe that is something he will reflect on whatever he gets up to in the next offseason.
And indeed, winningest is one of my least favorite words, but I've come across it through American sports. As a writer and a linguist, it just drives me mental to hear it. But thank you for trying to irk me at this hour of the evening, Colin. That was very nice of you. All right, Brian, let's talk about, in the spirit of irking Colin back, I'm gonna get you to talk about the Broncos. Tell us your thoughts on that game.
Is there anything to be said about the Broncos at this stage? But no, we will cover the game. Lamar Jackson, the quarterback of the Ravens, went off injured in this game, and that's significant news because Harbaugh, the head coach, has come out this evening at the daily press conference on Monday and said that it's unlikely he will play next weekend against the Steelers team that won again at the weekend against the Falcons. Look, for the Broncos, I did say on the show the other day, we didn't give the Broncos any chance in this game. I did say if we saw a similar type of game in which we saw recently where the Panthers went in against the Ravens, they lost 13-3, but that game was decided by a very, very late score. But the Ravens, and essentially the game played out in so many similarities. This Ravens offense can't get going, even with Lamar there. It's up and down. We saw some trick plays in the red zone when they looked like they were driving, which led to an interception. It was kind of a stupid call. And right now, I can't understand where they're going to go with this, because even if Lamar Jackson comes back, it just doesn't seem to be getting going. At the start of the season, they were so prolific. Lamar Jackson's in a contract year, and I'm sure he will get the contract, but you'd have to wonder whether they're in a position to make a real strong playoff run. For the Broncos, genuinely don't know what to say anymore. The offense is just, maybe Colin wants to put a point in that. I'm sure words on this. There's a video guy that puts a thing out every week. Colin, I'm not sure if he's still doing it, in which he refers to Russell Wilson and his 12 bathrooms, and he says at some stage he would get to the 13th touchdown in which he's thrown the season and he'd no longer have to do the video. But the way things are going, he might be doing a video for every week this season. They had an opportunity late on to try to put themselves in the position to win, and I was struggling with some of the play calling even on that drive. Russell Wilson had an opportunity he was aware he needed 5 or 6 additional yards to put Brandon McManus in a position to kick a game-winning field goal, and he went off the field to stop the clock, and I understand the reason behind that, but I didn't feel there was an aggressive manner within that particular play to try to get the yards needed, and that kind of sums up the season. There've been a few near misses in terms of winning games, but overall the head coach at this stage, I think, his days are numbered, unfortunately, and well, unfortunately for him, maybe not unfortunately for Broncos fans. I think he's been given an opportunity, hasn't worked out. Another difficult loss, another close game, but again, coming out the wrong side of it.
Fair enough. All right, there's only one game left, and maybe Colin, you could just pick this one up just to close us out. It was Deshaun Watson returned from suspension, and the Browns win 27-14. Any thoughts on that one?
Adam Schefter talked about Deshaun having gone through a process and learning, but there was no explanation about what the process entailed, what the process looked like. We're still yet to really hear an apology. Ultimately, the Texans are a mess. And they, despite it getting off to a good start, and obviously they were hyped up and you heard the crowd, and You saw the wife of the owner of the Texans actually turn her back on Watson, but ultimately mistakes cost them, and they ultimately go on to lose it. I think for them, they cannot wait to get to the end of the season either. I just wanted to share one quick stat just on the Broncos, just because it is so incredible. Mike Sando, who writes for The Athletic, and in fairness was calling out the Russell Wilson decline far earlier than most, but just from his piece today, before Sunday, NFL teams were 0-206 since 1995 when committing 2 turnovers, forcing none, and failing to exceed 10 points. The Ravens made it 1-206 by beating the Broncos. So there you go, 1-206. That's where the Broncos are
at. Something to be celebrated? I'm not sure. Okay, well, there we are. Will we do a quick look ahead at Monday Night Football, which is happening in some hours from now? But we can maybe take a quick one on this and your picks. So it's the Saints versus the Bucks. And maybe Brian, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, this is quite an unusual game in terms of what your expectations are, because the Saints, once they've had their troubles over the last couple of years, always seem to find a way to beat this Bucks team. Last year, the Saints had a difficult season. They beat them early on in the season, which was probably the first game in which we saw Brady start to look very different in terms of the expectation and the level of play we've seen over the course of the last number of years since he went to Tampa. Colin rightly called it out back then. Something didn't look right with Brady, and obviously as time has progressed, he's not the quarterback in which he was. The Saints beat them on that night, and then they played again in Tampa later on in the season, when at that stage the Saints season was over, and they went in, they beat them 9-0. They played each other in week 2, and the game was 0-0 until the fourth quarter, and that time around the Bucks did find a way to win. The Bucks have been inconsistent. They had a difficult start to the season. There was a lot of talk around the fact that Brady came out of retirement after only returned for 40 days. Then there was obviously his personal situation and whether he'd be really committed to playing the season. But at the start of the season, their defense was playing really strong, which helped them get the wins that they needed. But that kind of fell away, and they started losing some games. They seemed to. We felt they were starting to move in the right direction. They had 2 big wins in a row. Obviously, they won the game in Munich before going on the bye week, and then last week they went into Cleveland, and the game was there to be won. They didn't find a way to get over the line. It's kind of consistent with what we've seen this season. Some bright spots, inconsistency. The Saints team right now are kind of a precarious situation. We don't really know where they're going in terms of the quarterback. They started the season with Jameis Winston there, and then they moved on to Andy Dalton. They've had some bright spots as well, some good wins. They beat the Raiders. They're really strong performance against the Raiders a couple of weeks ago to beat the Rams, but they have got a lot of injuries going into this game. And bearing in mind the results have gone again the way of the Bucks this weekend in terms of being in the position to win the division. They really have to win this game, and despite the form over the last couple of years, I'm going to side with the Bucks to win this game. I think Brady will have a rebound game coming off last week. They are at home. They seem to be getting players back. I think Fournette's going to play tonight, which is their running back. He missed last week's game, which was crucial for them. I think he steadies the ship in terms of their run game, and I think they'll find a way to get past the Saints game. I don't think it'll be pretty. I think they'll just have enough to win on the night.
All right, so Brian calls the Bucks. What about you, Colin?
Just very quickly before that, just to say, Mark was going to cover the Steelers Falcons, but obviously had to disappear. And kudos, he had to disappear. So kudos to Magical Mike Tomlin, whose team finds a way. And for the Falcons, it'll be interesting to see if they now turn the keys over to Desmond Ridder to see what they have in him. I think Brian has kind of covered a lot of the aspects of tonight's game. I think these are 2 franchises who are going to see extraordinary turnover in the off season. Both will be looking for a franchise QB, and will need pieces to supplement that. When Brady goes, that will create a huge void. So how do the Bucs go about filling that? I think Brady will want one last trip to the playoff dance, and generally what Tom Brady wants, Tom Brady gets. So I'm going to back the Bucs to get the win tonight.
All right, I'm going to be difficult and say I'll back the Saints just because. Not that I necessarily have a vote, but that's my vote. Brian, did you have something very quick you wanted to throw in there?
Well, yeah, it was more on the Steelers game and not necessarily related to the game, but I don't know if anybody saw the footage of Mike Tomlin today in which he was making his way onto the field before the game, and one of the Steelers fans kind of gave him the thumbs up and said, "Come on, Mike," and he, to which he responded, "I'm effing working." Leave me alone. But that kind of sums up the head coach in which he is. He's a fantastic head coach, and for a team that's been lacking in talent in some positions, they're still finding ways to win games, which kind of contributes to the great head coach. But it was a great clip. I'm effing working. You know,
must try that around the office. Yeah.
Yeah. Really want to get away
I'm
with
effing working.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Mark has also gone with the Bucks, I believe, in this game.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right. And so we're pretty much there. Did you want to throw up a few last comments there, Brian, before we go?
Yeah, just referring back to the Lions in particular, we were discussing Goff, and we discussed the time again whether he's going to be the quarterback in the future for them, bearing in mind how well he's playing, with kind of a view to them potentially taking the quarterback in the next draft. His price tag at the moment, he's on a $30 million contract, so bearing in mind the salary cap in the NFL, that's quite restrictive in terms of trying to build around the team. So I can understand why Lions, and Owen is a Lions fan, I can understand why the Lions fans would think maybe the right thing is to address the quarterback in the draft to, I suppose, reduce your cap and give yourself more opportunities to bring players in other positions where they need players. A few other ones around the Lions in particular. Declan makes a similar point. He's been, we've all criticised Goff, but right now he is playing fantastic, and you can only be impressed with what he's done, in particular yesterday's game. No, it seems to be a lot of Lions comments, a few Cowboys comments thrown in, which is we have a strong Cowboys fan base here, so that's a
very good
surprise. Try to find one or two more.
Yeah, if there's anything else that's of interest.
Well, Declan calls out because again, just making a bit of a joy with me over the Eagles and the Jalen Hurts train, which Colin has been on, as I said, for a few years. It hasn't derailed yet, but no, that's about it. Again, a lot of comments in, a lot of various different engagements. Great to see everybody engage with one another in the background throughout the course of the film. We thank everybody for their support and obviously putting the comments in.
Yeah, thanks a million, and thanks for letting me jump on the Irish NFL show train, guys. It's been a pleasure. This was a maiden voyage for me with you, and I'm looking forward to being on the train all the way to the Super Bowl with you as well. So thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks, Colm. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mark, who's already slipped away into the night on the night train. And we'll see you all next time on the next Irish NFL show.